In this video, we'll be talking about plastic waste in labs and labs' roles in the disposal, release, impact reduction, and REM compliance of these wastes. To begin, we can show the waste stream following plastic waste, beginning with the use and disposal by lab users within the lab, and then going to their proper disposal method, either hazardous waste containment or collection services through recyclable or disposable trash, and these will be picked up by the appropriate facility, either REM or the grounds department. And the grounds department will either send the trash to the landfill or recyclables to a recycling facility. So now that you've seen an overview, we'll be more focused on the use and disposal within the labs and see some of the impact reductions that can be made within the lab. So to begin with impact reduction, we can ask ourselves, why is this important, specifically to lab waste with regards to plastics? So labs use large amounts of plastics, including pipettes, petri dishes, gloves, pipette boxes, and many others. And these are just thrown away. And the waste profile of labs is a majority of these plastics that are just thrown away, but also indicates a large percentage of the total plastic waste profile in Purdue in general. So although we would like to reduce all of these plastics usage or recycle them more, it's important to properly dispose and recycle them, especially given by guidelines through the Purdue Grounds Department and the Purdue REM facility, just in case there are chemical contaminants on these plastics that could harm the users disposing or recycling these plastics or the environment in general. So general recycling is important, and this is supported by the Black, Gold, and Green Initiative. However, we're more focused on lab activities and recycling and plastic reduction techniques based on labs specifically. So to begin with some impact reduction methods, we can ask ourselves what can be recycled. So REM has a lot of guidelines set up for solid waste, including recycling solid waste and disposing of solid waste, especially in labs. But for general recyclables, this includes papers, soft plastics, cans, and just everyday recyclables. However, lab recyclables include the general, as long as they're not contaminated with hazardous or biological material. And from packaging and lab materials that you might receive from vendors, recyclables include plastic film and cardboard. Now, there are possible recyclables, but they're not implemented at Purdue because there is not enough support for them. So these include hard plastics such as pipette boxes, styrofoam from packaging, and gloves, which we use a lot of. However, there's a small program at Purdue recycling gloves. So this includes Kimberly-Clark and a company called TerraCycle. So what they do is they gather all the gloves and apparel worn in some labs at these three buildings. They send it to a central location on campus, which is then sent to a facility which recycles these materials into powder, which you can make basically into any object. Objects shown here include benches and chairs. So some other impact reduction techniques, including other best practice tips besides recycling in labs. For plastics purchasing, and this is more directed towards lab managers, you can purchase environmentally friendly products such as pipette tip boxes or even pipettes or gloves or any lab materials that your lab may need. And MIT had listed an address here. They have a whole web page of environmentally friendly vendors that are not only environmentally friendly but economically competitive. So that way labs don't feel overwhelmed when they're trying to buy environmentally friendly products but they can't afford them. It's not economically feasible for their lab. And continuing, one of these products is biodegradable gloves, which I've seen competitively priced towards normal gloves. And the best vendor I'd seen is at this address here, Show a Best Glove. And so lab activities just in general for all lab users, for best practice tips, just recycling in general, such as that first slide that I just previously shown, those tips work tremendously and help tremendously in reducing disposal and waste. The reuse of pipettes is possible when applicable and under the user's discretion. I know biological measurements require very precise and small increments of measurements. So it's not very possible for biological methods, but when you're using basic buffers and general chemicals like that, then it's possible to reuse them after a wash. And also pipette boxes can be reused. I know there's articles out there about how to reuse them, and we listed one right after this video just to show you what can be done to reuse pipette boxes. So revisiting the plastic waste stream that we'd shown earlier, now we can discuss labs' roles in complying with REM guidelines for plastic and solid waste management. So although we're not REM facility workers, we are in contact with REM pretty significantly, and they have just general compliance guidelines that they thought labs, it might be helpful for labs. So this includes reusing containers sent to REM. In order to reuse containers that you send to REM, mark if you'd like to have the empty containers returned to you for reuse, because REM does not recycle. Continuing, all empty containers should be triple rinsed and either reused or thrown in the trash unless they contain hazardous materials. And also, clean, uncontaminated broken glassware and plastic sharps, as defined in REM guidelines, should be placed in a corrugated box or other strong disposable container. And when ready for disposal, the box should be taped shut and prominently labeled as sharp. So as stated earlier in the video, here are some sources that we used specifically just for you to see some of the vendors or environmentally friendly products that you can buy. And there's also an article if you are interested in the dispute between reusing and recycling pipette boxes, which is actually very interesting. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it, and hopefully talk to you next week.